Let's start today by using Claude to define 10 top life hacks for saving money on a budget.
So let's ask it and say, what are 10 tips and tricks to budget better? Let's see what it gives us. So what it has is 10 different things that it thinks will be beneficial. And what we can do is we can ask it to expand on some of these if we like them. So tracking expenses, report all your purchases, get a clear picture of your spending habits. This is definitely something that people recommend a lot. I keep all my receipts for this reason. So it helps in case you're trying to figure out, did I spend money on this? How much am I spending? And then you can review it. If you see that you have 30 receipts from Wendy's over the past 2 or 3 months, maybe you want to go there less.
Do you
30 to 1.
save your receipts?
I do. I do. I save them all. My mom's an accountant, so she's always made me do that because when I was in high school or something and she gave me her credit card to maybe get food with friends or something, she would say, if you don't have a receipt, I will call you about it when I get the statement. And if I don't see that we have a receipt, I'm going to assume that someone might have our stuff, or I'm going to ask you, what did you do on day X that this is showing up on? Were you out with friends? Did you get McDonald's? How much was it? So I always just made it a habit to make sure I did that because it helped out. 50-30-20 rule, it says, which is just how you allocate your income. Different finance goals, set clear, measurable, and objective ones to motivate your budgeting efforts. This might be something that we could ask it about. So maybe we can say, you mentioned setting clear financial goals. You want them to be clear, measurable, and motivate you in your budgeting efforts. What are some examples of that? So potentially that could be something
Maybe
you could
we
ask it.
can go back to when you were a starving college student and ask it specifically for someone on that kind of budget.
Sure.
Because this could be a millionaire's budget too, just saying.
That's very true. So we will go in here at the bottom and we will ask it, please give specific recommendations for someone who is a broke college student trying to budget. And let's see if he's changed. Interesting. It's talking about student discounts. So that's definitely helpful. And things that are afforded to students that aren't to others. So bare bone budget, and it gives some examples that others won't have. You're not going to have tuition if you're not a student, and you're going to have rent and food, but you're not going to have textbooks. So it's going to talk about financial aid, getting a part-time job. Are your parents supporting you with that? All kinds of different things. So even though it's good money management and good habits in general for anyone to practice making sure they know how much they spend on rent, food, budgeting. This is going to go, okay, let's enumerate things for students that others wouldn't have, like tuition, like textbooks. It changes based on your life circumstance, your life situation, and it knows you're not making as much money. So that's why it says financial aid. That's why it says part-time job, because a lot of students don't have the time to work full-time, or it's a lot harder to. Parental support, because they know if you're someone who's younger, you're going to be having parental support possibly when you're doing stuff like being a student, going to school, because you don't have enough money to make ends meet yourself. So you're going to have to get that from different avenues and different revenue sources, as opposed to someone who's in the workforce in their 40s. They might not be getting that parental support. They might not be doing a part-time job. They might have a full-time job. They might have two jobs, whatever that looks like. Student discounts, that's another thing. Just like how there's military discounts, just like how there are discounts for senior citizens, there's different things that you can have where people are able to take advantage of those. And if we'd asked about someone who is in the service, if we'd asked about someone who is older, I bet it will mention that as well and say, take advantage of your discounts, make sure you're doing that. And even in the state of Ohio, you have, I believe it's the Golden Buckeye, where you can take that if you're over a certain age. I'm unsure of the age, and it gives you discounts. So that is something that is interesting to know. Cooking your own meals, definitely something that I know about, and that's worked well for me. Making sure that you're eating in instead of out. If you're going to do a campus meal plan, make sure that you're doing it right, because they do also mention those can be costly. So you need to look and sit down and see what the numbers are. What is my per diem cost per meal? How much is it? Can I do it cheaper myself? Is it worth it for me with time? Is it worth it for me financially? Can I make food myself that is nutritious, feeds me enough, and I have the time for it to do it? And it tells you maybe a rice cooker or a slow cooker for easy and budget-friendly meals. If you don't have that time, knowing you're on the go as a student, knowing you might have a second job,
Do you have a rice cooker?
I do not have a rice cooker. I have actually not used one before, but I do have a crock pot. My mom definitely used that a lot when I was growing up. So that is something that is very nice. It's very set it, forget it. And it lets someone who is busy still be able to cook and save money. Campus resources. That's another thing, again, that's specific to students. You're not going to have campus resources if you are not in college. Free entertainment, that's something that works for anyone, especially if you are a broke college kid on a budget. Public transit, some colleges have their own bus lines and things like that. So if you can't have your car or you can't afford a car, these are options. Biking, limiting exposure to social activities. So it's saying that if you're going to go and do things with limiting expensive social activities. So if you're going somewhere with friends, make sure that it's not something that is going to break the bank. You can do things that are cheap and inexpensive, movie night at home, doing a potluck, free local attractions, paid work, making money on the side, student banking, you can get discounts for that, no fees or minimums, tracking your spending using apps, and then building an emergency fund. Let's also explore another option. As we know, this talks a lot about students, but what if you just want to do something where you have your first fast food job, you might be making minimum wage, how are you going to budget doing that, and what are some things that you can do where you're not going to have those student advantages that you would have when you weren't making a whole lot as a student. Now you're doing your own thing, working, but you don't have those resources. Let's see how it changes what it recommends. I just got my first job working minimum wage in fast food in the state of Ohio because minimum wage changes based on where you live. Please help me to be smart with my money by recommending 10 tips and tricks for me to do this. And look at this on the side. So what it did was it generated a basic budget spreadsheet. So you can actually come here and you can download this. You can download this and utilize this and enter things into it. So it's going to assume that you have rent and housing, utilities, food, transportation, phone, insurance, debt payments, savings, entertainment, miscellaneous, total expenses, and then it's going to have your net income. And it even tells you that's your income minus your expenses. That's going to be what's left over. Then it says adjust categories as you need, track actual spending versus budget amounts, review and update monthly. Now notice, this one is not going to give you the different things that students get discounts with. So this is going to give you just things that anyone would have access to. So it also says, congratulations on your job. And it tells us that Ohio's minimum wage as of 2024 is $10.45 an hour for non-tipped employees. That's important. That's part of why I specified that. Because if you're in California, it's going to be different. If you're in New York, it's going to be different. If you're in Ohio, it's going to be different. So you need to tell it geographically, here's where I am. What can I do with this? So direct deposit's good too.
Maybe ask it, how much rent can I afford?
Sure, that's a good one. And it's got some of the same stuff we saw in the last one. Emergency fund, about how much that should be. Employee benefits, that's kind of nice. It's mentioning that too, where you might get some free or discounted meals. When I worked food service, that was something that we had. I definitely took full advantage of that. Taxes, make sure you're filling out your W-4 correctly. That's really nice. And it even went ahead and gave the budgeting spreadsheet. It says don't use ATMs that charge fees, wood overdrafts, the basics, but some people wouldn't think of that. Good. So let's see how much work we can afford with this and how that would work on the budget that we have. Assume I continue to make minimum wage. How much rent can I afford in Ohio? I expect it'll give guidelines on this of here's typically how much you should do. So it says calculate your monthly income. So it's saying you assume that you work 40 hours a week, and then that's $418 a week times 52 weeks, 21,000 or so a year. So divide that by 12 months, gives you about 1,800 per month of your gross. Then you estimate your taxes. So it's taking out about 20% for taxes, which is a pretty fair estimate. So it leaves you about $1,450 for your remaining after you take out tax. Then it says apply the 30% rule, which is a known rule in finance where it says you want to spend no more than 30% of your net income on your rent. So it factors that by saying this times 30% gives you $434.72. Now you might be saying, well, that's not really feasible where I live. I can't do that. That is when you need to start looking at roommates. And I'm curious if it says something about roommates on this. So it says about $435 and it notes a few things. This is a tight budget. So it's telling you, we know this is tight. This is definitely a lot, and this is going to be hard to do. Housing at this price in some areas of Ohio, you might struggle to find that, especially in larger cities. Actual take-home pay can vary based on specific tax situations, any benefits or deductions, etc. That's fair. Consider alternatives like sharing an apartment with roommates. So there we go. That makes sense because there's no way you're going to find something for like $450 or so. You're going to need roommates or maybe living at home, but this is assuming that we are trying to rent somewhere. So how can you do that? And it's just one part of housing costs, utilities. So it's mentioning that too of, yeah, your rent is the number it is, but you have to pay utilities. You're going to probably have internet. What do you need to consider? If you're working part-time or fewer than 40, your income will be less. So you could have a lower rent that you could afford. And then with those constraints, look ahead for some sharing house options to reduce individual rent burden, consider places with low cost of living within Ohio, and then look at opportunities to increase your income. So it's telling you you can do this, but there's better options and alternatives that you can work towards to change this situation if you don't like it and you aren't okay with it. It even says explore affordable housing programs in your area that may be available to lower income workers, which is definitely something to take advantage of because there are a lot of those throughout the state of Ohio, but it depends where you are, who services you. It does say, caveat, while the 30% rule is a good guideline, your personal budget might require adjustments based on your specific circumstances and other expenses. Life changes, it's in flux, you need to change with it. So we could also ask it how to set up a bank account, like you were saying, because a lot of people don't know that. So let's say it is your first job and you need to go ahead and get your paycheck deposited. How do I even do that? Where do I start? I know I wouldn't know how to do that when I was first starting out. I know that my parents had set up a bank for me and I had just gone ahead and done it that way, where I've always kind of had a bank account, but I mean, where do you even start with that? So let's ask it. I just got my first paycheck. How do I set up a bank account? So it generated some things. We're not going to go ahead and read through all of them, but you'll be able to see as I scroll through. Choose your bank, gives reasons on how you should do that. Gather necessary documents, visit the bank or apply online, choose your account type, provide your info, fund the account, set up online and mobile banking. There's apps for it. Order checks and a debit card, set up direct deposit, learn about account features, then just some little tricks on it. So you can obviously read through that at your leisure, but it's very interesting to see that it's going to give you not only how to set up the account, but some tips and tricks with it that you might not be aware of, pitfalls to avoid, and things that are going to be helpful for you in your journey of having a bank account and start to make some money.
Sounds good.